Another potential platoon bat for the Phillies to consider is Angels outfielder Kevin Pillar. Started the year with the White Sox, but did not play well and was DFA'd. Angels picked him up, and he got off to an incredible start in his Angels career, hitting .409 with a 1.147 OPS in the month of May. Has cooled off considerably since June 1st, hitting 195 with a 271 on base percentage, but he is still hitting lefties well in that span, hitting .333 versus lefties with an 839 OPS. And that's the biggest thing. You need someone in left field who can platoon with Marsh right now. Similar to Mark Kanye, Pillar would not be a flashy pickup, but I feel like the Phillies are going to opt for more of a platoon option rather than a starter, and I think he'd be a fine addition in that role. 35-year-old, he's going to be a free agent this offseason. He turns 36 in January. That would also probably make him cheaper. In his career versus lefties, he's a 282 hitter with a 783 OPS. That's solid, but I think his numbers in recent years are a better representation of his ability to platoon. This year versus left-handed pitchers, he has 64 at-bats. He slashed .359, .406, .625. That comes out to a 1.031 OPS, 3 home runs, 6 doubles, and 12 RBI. Between this year and last year, he has 180 plate appearances, flashing .291, .317, .529 with 9 home runs, 12 doubles, and 30 RBI. And over the last 6 seasons, bigger sample size here. Keep in mind, his 2022 season was cut short due to injury, and 2020 was obviously shortened, but 565 plate appearances, and he has slashed .283, .312, .509, which comes out to an .821 OPS, 28 home runs with 85 RBIs and 35 doubles in that span. Pretty evident he can hit lefties. I see 2021 as more of an outlier in that department. He had a 677 OPS that year, but again, I think that's an exception. I don't think that's the norm. If the Phillies want someone who can push Rojas for at-bats, I don't think you can necessarily expect that from Pillar at this point in his career. He just does not hit righties well at all. And he'd probably be in the same category as Mark Kanye in that he's more of a fallback option. That said, I think he's a more realistic option along with Kanye, given that he's older and a rental and a platoon. He's also under contract for less than $1 million, so the rest of the year he'd be a pretty cheap acquisition to take on. It wouldn't take anything money-wise. And he could also possibly be packaged with Carlos Estevez, who could be a good addition to the bullpen. Go check out our video on him. And the Phillies obviously have a recent trade history with the Angels from 2022 when they dealt Logan O'Hoppe for Brandon Marsh, and they dealt Mickey Moniak for Noah Syndergaard later in the day. You mentioned Mark Kanye. One reason I like him a little bit more as a hitter is because of his patience at the plate. That to me is very valuable when it comes to playoff baseball, and you have to look at this as far as what can you do for me in October and what was the potential there. Pillar is not the most patient bat, even versus lefties. He sees around 3.7 to 3.8 pitches per plate appearance over the last few years, and he has a career 4% walk rate. I think you'd get much more competitive at bats from a hitter like Mark Kanye, who has much more discipline and doesn't chase out of the zone very much. He also puts the ball in play a little more often than Pillar. Pillar still had a 25% strikeout rate versus lefties in 111 plate appearances last year, but I would say that's not necessarily a trend for him. It is down this year, and he doesn't usually have that high of a K rate versus lefties, but it is something to note, especially since Kanye's K rate is pretty low every year, usually around 20% or lower, especially versus lefties. He doesn't really struggle to put the ball in play. With that said, I still think Pillar would be a solid pickup, especially in the platoon role. One thing I really like about Pillar is that he's been really good with runners in scoring position in recent seasons. In 2024, in that department, he hit .367 with a 990 OPS and 23 RBI in 56 plate appearances. 2023, he hit .289 with an 825 OPS and 22 RBI in 51 plate appearances. And in 2021, he hit .300 with a 940 OPS and 35 RBI in 88 plate appearances. And versus lefties, those numbers have been even better. He slugged .519 versus left-handed pitchers with runners scoring position in 2023. He is slugging .789 versus lefties this year with runners in scoring position. He does not have the best career postseason numbers, but he really has not had many opportunities since he left Toronto. He really only had 2015 and 2016 in Toronto, and he had just 7 plate appearances in the playoffs last year with Atlanta. Was good in 2015 in the playoffs, so it hasn't been a completely bad track record. He'd also have 46,000 fans behind him in Red October, and again, he would mostly face lefties. I think he'd exclusively face lefties, to be honest. So that gives me a little more hope that he could come through in some spots in October. We saw Christian Pache do it a couple times last year. He had a big hit in a wild card game to start off the playoffs. Got an RBI single. And defensively, I think Kevin Pillar is obviously much better than Mark Kanye. He's not the defender he was early in his career in Toronto. Obviously, he was a pretty good center fielder for some time out there, and that might be understating it. But he can play all 3 outfield positions. He's fine out there, in my opinion. 3 outs above average in left field last year in Atlanta, and this year he's a net neutral at 0 outs above average. He does have -1 outs above average overall, but that's mostly coming from his time in right field. In right field, he's not been great. Most of his -1.8 ultimate zone rating and -4 defensive run saves are from his time in right field. He's played 5 more innings in left field this year and has just a -0.3 ultimate zone rating and -1 defensive run save. So again, not great, but I definitely think he's playable out there. Like I said, I think he'd be fine. He gets decent jumps. I'm not really too concerned about him. He can also play center if needed. Obviously, that's more of his natural position. He played there for a long time in Toronto. -1 defensive run saved, 0.2 ultimate zone rating this season in center field. Like I said, he obviously played there at a high level in Toronto. He's probably more comfortable there. I think he's fine in left field. You just probably won't put him in right field. For whatever reason, he's just not the best in right field. While he wouldn't be my first choice, he's another guy I'd be fine with if they acquired him. He'd likely be very cheap and would fill a potential need. Maybe Weston Wilson fills that role and you don't need to do anything major at the deadline, but even with that in mind, I think it would make even more sense to get Kevin Pillar because he's a cheap option. You can move Weston Wilson to more of the utility role that Whit Merrifield was in, play him at different spots. He doesn't have to just be the platoon for Brandon Marsh. And then you just have another potential option in Kevin Pillar and you have an outfield bench bat and you have a guy who's going to hit lefties. So it's a conservative move for sure. Again, a fine one in my opinion. Pillar also may retire after this year. It'd be awesome for him and for the Phillies to end things this year with a ring. It would be quite the way to end a career to go out on top with a World Series ring, and hopefully he could help the Phillies do that if he came here. But it's definitely an interesting acquisition here. Again, not the flashiest one, but I'm looking at platoon options. I think he'd be fine. We'll get into more of the starter options as the deadline nears, but thank you guys for watching. I appreciate y'all. God bless. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments, and we will see you guys later.